Thank you for coming to the teach-in today. We are going to discuss the executive orders that went into effect that impact immigrants and also refugees. And so the structure of our panel this morning or afternoon will be Professor Aligres will start with giving an overview of the immigration provisions of the executive order. I will give an overview of the provisions that impact refugees, and then we'll go back to an overview of the second order that was instituted. Then what we want you to have like a basic understanding of the law and what the law means, because there's a lot in terms of what's being said in the media. So we want you to understand just 101, Immigration 101 on the order, Refugee Law 101 on the order. Then we have 4 attorneys who are here that have been working on cases at the airport. They are going to talk to us briefly about what they're going to be doing. Then we have 2 attorneys over here from AP Gump who will talk about the work that they've been doing. So to give you an idea of what the role of attorneys are in challenging the orders and protecting individuals who are in the country or trying to transit to the country, and give you an idea of what you can do as an attorney. So I'll start.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm Professor Olivares. I know many of you, and thank you for being here. Sorry I can't see you all over there. So I just wanted to just give a really brief overview for those of you who haven't had immigration law or haven't had an opportunity to study it very well. I know, and as Professor McAnder said, there's a lot of just kind of sort of half-truths going around or things that you might be wondering about. And so we thought we'd just talk just briefly about where this comes from, where the power of the executive comes from. And I wanted to just put it out there that much of what's happened so far is not new, right? It's not innovative. It's not as far as what the subject is, but what the process is not. And it all comes back to the plenary power of the executive and Congress to make decisions when it comes to immigration law and policy. So what we might think of as the Constitution always protecting all of our rights and always being there in the judiciary, making sure that everything that the Congress and the executive is doing, serving us as checks and balances. In the world of immigration law, it's different, right? So those of you who've had it and have studied it know this already, are familiar with it, and it feels different. Due process is different when it comes to immigration law and policy, and all stemming from what has been termed plenary power, which is several hundreds of years old in our country. So when you think, for the most part, of constitutional protections, it's important for us to remember from the beginning that in many ways they don't apply the same way to certain non-citizens who are coming in to the country. So thinking about the first executive order, which maybe we've heard the most about most recently, the one that's regarding this limiting who can come in, and from in particular we've heard about over and over, the 7 countries that are banned. And as Professor McAnder said, she's going to speak about the refugee provisions. So what a couple of things it talks about is, one of the sections talks about is the president invoking his authority under section 212F of the INA. If you've read the executive order, you've seen this language. And he's using his authority, it says, to suspend the entry of all nationals of 7 designated countries on non-immigrant and immigrant visas into the U.S. for 90 days. So 212F is a provision in the INA that sits in what we term the inadmissibility grounds, and it essentially talks about what types of, for lack of a better way to put it, people, right, we allow in under the INA. So it gives the president broad authority to suspend the entry of any aliens or class of aliens if he determines that such entry would be detrimental to the interests of the United States. That's what the section talks about. It's been invoked multiple times by past presidents, but in far more limited ways. It's never been used so broadly to ban all nationals of a given country or countries, not even after September 11th, the events of September 11th. Other things that we've talked about are where those 7 countries come from. We've heard a lot in the news and in social media, public media, that it's already existed, right? That it's not a Muslim ban, but it's just these 7 countries that have already been determined. And it references section 217A2. So this is a provision in a section of the immigration laws governing what's known as the Visa Waiver Program. So in general, any non-citizen coming to the United States needs a visa, but there are exceptions to that provision, waiver perception provisions, part of a visa waiver program. So certain people from certain countries can come in without needing to go through the visa process. But after the San Bernardino shootings in 2015, Congress amended the statute to require visas for certain visa waiver nationals who hold dual nationality and nationality of those countries, Iraq, Syria, Iran, Yemen, Sudan, Libya, and Somalia. So it's about the visa waiver provisions. If you might have heard about Obama did this, right? It only comes from Obama is what I've heard about. And so it's what this provision said was just about that visa waiver program back in 2015. So I'm going to leave it to our lawyer, I guess, to discuss the effects of those provisions that have been happening for arriving people, the advocacy that lawyers jumped into and started planning. And I'll leave that there. Right, I think that's all I'll say for now.
So what I'm going to talk about is there are two executive orders. So one is the border security and immigration enforcement improvements, and the other one, which Professor Olivares started to talk about, was protecting the nation from foreign terrorist entry into the United States. And specifically, I'm going to talk about Section 5, which is the realignment of the refugee admissions program. And as future lawyers, I really recommend that you go pull these executive orders up. You can find them almost anywhere. They're even in some news outlets. There are annotations by scholars and people commenting on what each section means. So I really recommend that you pull them up. So this Section 5 is the realignment of the refugee admissions program. So in order to understand what that section means, I want to give you a little bit of background about the refugee admissions program in the United States. So the United States is a signatory to the 1967 Protocol to the Refugee Convention. It signed this protocol in 1968. It also is a signatory to the Convention Against Torture, which it signed in 1988 and ratified in 1994. So both of these conventions obligate the United States to not return an individual back to a country where their life or freedom would be threatened, where they would be subject to torture, or they would be subject to persecution. Specifically, this concept is called non-refoulement. And specifically in the protocol, Article 33.1 says that if an individual's life or freedom would be threatened by a contracting party, they cannot send the individual back to their country of origin. So these international norms were implemented into the United States law when Congress implemented the concept of non-refoulement in the Immigration and Nationality Act. The specific provision is 243H, which gives the Attorney General, and it's important to note that it's the Attorney General, has the power to not deport any alien, a foreign national, to a country if the Attorney General determines that the individual's life or freedom would be threatened because of their race, nationality, religion, political opinion, or sexual. Second, in 1980, Congress ratified the 1967 Protocol and adopted the Convention's definition of a refugee. And this definition says that an individual who has experienced past persecution or has a well-founded fear of persecution cannot be returned back to their country of origin. So specifically, how are these provisions or these legal norms implemented? So when an individual is in the United States or at the border, they can ask for asylum. That's one way that an individual can seek protection under the Refugee Convention. The second way is what we're hearing about and is specifically addressed in Section 5 is the third country resettlement provision. And so these are individuals who have met the legal definition of a refugee. Usually they're in refugee camps for an extended period of time, and then they start the process to be resettled to the United States. So Section 5 of the order, the executive order, specifically targets this program, and it also implicates the provisions for individuals who are at the border whose visas may not be accepted if they're from one of the 7 countries that are mentioned. They should be able to demand asylum if they have a fear of returning back to their country of origin. So first of all, the executive order, it suspends the third country resettlement program for 120 days. And during this 120 days, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, and the Director of National Intelligence are going to review the program, and they are supposed to implement procedures or research procedures to make the vetting system for the refugee program, I guess, more robust. I don't know if that's possible, but that's what they plan to do. It's going to, one of the provisions you might have heard of in Section C, it's deeming that the admission of all Syrians are detrimental to the United States interest. So no admission of Syrian refugees. And then it's prioritizing claims made by individuals on the basis of religious persecution, with the notation that the religion of the individual has to be a minority religion within their individual's country of nationality. Some of the other provisions, really quickly, are limiting the entry of refugees to 50,000. This is nothing that's new, because the president has discretion over the admissions and the numbers of refugees that are admitted. Also indicated in this section 5, is that refugees will be admitted on a case-by-case basis when it's in the national interest of the country to admit an individual. Again, it references back to religious minorities. When enabling a person to come to the United States would conform to pre-existing international agreements, so the Refugee Convention and also the Convention Against Torture, or it says in this provision when the person is already in transit. So I really, again, recommend that you pull up the orders, look at the Federal Register, read through them, and understand, try to put them in context of what you're hearing in the media. There's so much that we could say, but I think I'll turn it over to the lawyers so that they can tell us about the work that they're being.
Well, let me just
sorry.
One more little thing that I just wanted to mention, because I think Professor McAndrews and I were talking several times in the past few days preparing for this, and one of the things that I mentioned in that is that many things have happened in the past few weeks. It's not just this one executive order. And I think it's really important for all of us to be really aware of all of the other things that are also happening, and to try to understand the implications of those as well, or to understand the implications, right, because there is no try. So, for example, one of the other executive orders that came out has some very important provisions in there that have gotten not as much media time. One of them, for example, talks about the priority shifts for who will be prioritized when they're being deported. So there's been a memo that's been out several years now that under the Obama administration that had, these are the priorities of people who would be top priority for deportation, and it says things like persons convicted of violent crimes, etc., and has other types of things as well. Well, one of the executive orders also declared that those are going to shift, and that there's going to be different types of priorities now for people who would be removable, which is a term used under the statute. And it says things like people who have been convicted of any criminal offense, have been charged with any criminal offense where such charge has not been resolved, have committed acts that constitute a chargeable criminal offense, so even if you haven't been charged, but you committed an act, have engaged in fraud or willful misrepresentation in connection with any official matter or application before a governmental agency. Some are saying that that is some, if you've worked under an ID that's not legal before, that could be what it's talking about. Have abused any program related to receipt of public benefits. So if, what does that mean? If you receive public benefits somehow, and it's what the agency is calling abuse. If you're subject to a final order of removal but who have not complied with your legal obligation to depart the United States, or in the judgment of an immigration officer, otherwise pose a risk to public safety or national security, right? So these are incredibly broad a list of priorities, which we have not seen before. And lots of advocates and scholars and lawyers saw this and really kind of was shocked. Well, nothing shocking, but they couldn't believe that this was going to be so broad. Committed a chargeable offense. What does that mean? I mean, we know here at Howard in our curriculum we learn a lot about the ways in which the justice system doesn't work all the time in a just way. So I want to just kind of point that out, that this is another thing that I think we're going to have to see a lot of advocacy upon and really think about what it's going to mean for people. And then the other order that you might have heard about is the sanctuary city provision. So essentially what one of these orders also says is that the federal government will cut all federal funds except those for law enforcement if there is any policy or practice that serves as a sanctuary city, right? So you might have heard this, and essentially what this is referring to is requiring localities to work with federal immigration officials to find, locate, and essentially, turn over information about people who might be in the country unlawfully or in an undocumented status of some sort. So what this provision is essentially saying is that if cities, and San Francisco has just challenged this in litigation or filed litigation about this, but there's cities all over the country which have deemed themselves sanctuary city, including Washington, D.C., saying we are not, as local officials, going to cooperate with ICE to hand over people who you'd like us to, right, who are in our custody. So I just wanted to mention those two others. There, again, I echo what Professor McAnder said about reading these, right? Don't just read the article that talks about them, or the Facebook post that says something about it, right? But actually go and read it. I always say read the primary source, right? Read the source and try to figure out, what it is and what all of those things mean. It's very important that we educate ourselves from the source in this context. So that's our part. And I'd like now to turn it over to two lawyers. And we have two lawyers over there, so we'll start over here. And we wanted to really give you a sense of what's going on, but we also wanted to make sure that we give some opportunity for questions. So I'm going to try to, we're going to try to keep it, to give information, but also give you an opportunity to talk. So who'd like to go first? Okay, so first we have Golnush Hakimdavar. Yes, and she is a rule of law expert. She specializes in constitutional reform in transition states and developing countries. She's worked in legal development for the past 7 years in Kosovo, Iran, Afghanistan, Burma. She's become involved with the Iranian American Bar Association of DC, and especially once realizing how the Iranian American community would be affected by the executive order. And she's been volunteering since Saturday at 3 p.m. Alongside the newly formed Dulles Justice Coalition, where she's been on the ground providing assistance. And then we'll hear from Serene Shabaya and
Sami Shabaya.
Sami Shabaya, yes, who's going to also educate us today. Serene, am I saying your name correctly?
Yes.
Is a civil rights attorney in D.C., formerly at the ACLU of Maryland, among other places, has worked on immigrants' rights and criminal immigration issues. And she's managing legal intake at that Dulles Justice Coalition. And she's been screening and placing cases as they come through, responding to requests for assistance, working on litigation and emerging cases, staying on top of court orders and how they are not being enforced, access to counsel issues, emerging issues, etc. And mommying at the same time. Like many of us, all of us do it.
Shout out to all the working moms, right?
That's right, amen. Okay, so please.
Thank you so much. So my name is Golnush Hakimdavar, and thank you for coming in for having us here to tell you a little bit about our experience at the airport. What I will do is I'll just inform you about how I became involved starting on last Friday, or 2 Fridays ago now, on the 27th. Having read the original executive order, the draft, when it came out, the concerns started out in the Iranian American community. I'm an Iranian American and an immigrant. Once the actual final order was signed on Friday at 4:30 p.m., the concerns were really high. One of the reasons was with the broad nature of the executive order, the broad language. It refers to immigrants, non-immigrants, and refugees being affected, from those 7 countries being affected. And immediately, our big question was, okay, what happens to legal permanent residents? Knowing that there were already flights that were coming in, at least we were sure from Iran, that would be coming in on Saturday, how would those individuals be affected, since the executive order would go into effect immediately? And what will be the procedures that the Customs and Border CBP, Customs and Border Protection would, been saying the acronym so many
I
times.
know,
just-
you forget
And
what it
Right.
stands for.
How would they react to the individuals that are coming in? Will they be detained? Will they be kept for long terms for questioning? And this is why we decided as a group to go to the airport at Dulles. And many others across the country decided the same thing, so it wasn't just us. We weren't sure what we would be facing when we would arrive at the airport. So the way that the executive order was written, it actually did include all legal permanent residents. Now, these are individuals who have been vetted for many, many years. I personally, my own family was vetted for 8 years before we received a legal permanent resident status. So it's not something that happens overnight. Just to give you a little bit of statistics, in 2015 there were 932,346, so about 932,000 diversity visas issued to Iranian Americans, so now Iranian Americans. And these are special type of visas that are issued through a lottery system. That's a pretty large number, and the next down the line is 252,000 to Sudanese. These are individuals who have received documents that allows them to come in and receive a green card once they arrive to the country. All of these individuals would be affected by the executive order. And there were individuals that were flying in as the executive order came out. So our question was, how can we help them once they arrive? In the afternoon, when we arrived at the airport, we already realized that not only the CBP did not necessarily have all the full information of how to deal with the individuals, but there were reports that some were given forms, some legal permanent residents were given forms to sign that would, under pressure, once they arrived at the airport, that they would voluntarily give up their legal permanent residence status. So that raised a lot of concern for us. How do we deal with that? How do we get all the lawyers who were at the airport to speak with the individuals who were coming in? Because we were denied access at all times. And that's when we went into action. And that's when not only we as Iranian American lawyers, but we saw a lot of different attorneys who were at the airport coming together and trying to figure out how to get access to the individuals. So I'll let the details, Serena will cover the details of how that happened, but that's a little bit of a background. Just to be more specific, once what we have seen, there have been many orders that came out, but what we have seen was individuals that I mentioned, the diversity visa individuals as an example, once they arrived, other than giving them the form to sign that would give up their legal permanent residence status, there was also a red mark put on the visa that would say that the visa was no longer valid. We've had many orders that came out, with the most recent one being the allowing things to go back to prior to the executive order. But what happens is, they've had the visas revoked. So now we have cases and cases of individuals piling up who are coming back to the airports or who are trying to get on flights and they're not being let on because their visa is actually essentially revoked. So it's not only that we had to deal with that urgent situation that came up on Saturday, but now we have to go back and handle all the visas that were revoked and all the circumstances that arose once the executive order came out. So aside from, and I want to bring out a specific example of legal permanent residents being detained. There was a family, an older husband and wife, legal permanent residents, so green card holders, who arrived at the airport on Saturday. The woman has heart condition, the man is legally blind, so he couldn't see, both in wheelchair. They were detained for 9 hours. They were pulled alongside 24 other, this is from one flight only, 24 other, what we have statistics about Iranian Americans, 24 other Iranian Americans put in a secondary, which is a room kind of at the airport, and detained from 8 hours, some longer. We had up to 21 hours reported, and without any information, without access to their medicine, without access to a lawyer, without access to their cell phones. I should add that cell phones were also removed. Cell phones and passports were taken away once the individuals arrived at the airport. So all of this raises concern for the attorneys on the other side who don't have access to these individuals, who cannot provide them legal advice, who cannot tell them, do not sign any form that is put in front of you. But an individual who's sitting there in secondary, afraid of what is going to happen to me, and being told, if you don't sign, you are no longer going to be able to come, we will deport you, and you will not be able to come back for 5 years. These are legal permanent residents. They have a house here, they have their cars here, they have their mortgage here, so they have their families here. So they're really affected, and they would be signing forms of request. Okay, so that's one example. Another example that is a more recent example of what I was saying with the individuals whose visas were revoked. We had a gentleman who had attempted to come into the country without knowing that the executive order had gone into place, arrives at the airport, and the CBP officers had marked his visa invalid. Now he's now stranded in the country where he was trying to come in from. And well, in this case it was Canada, so it wasn't so far away. So we tried to get him into the country once the new orders came out that would allow individuals with revoked visas to come in. But now he's held for another set of questioning for another 11 hours at the airport on his second attempt to come in, because he does not have a valid visa anymore. So it's a twofold, actually multi-layered situation, and this is only the urgency of the matter right now. If we think about it, with the refugees and with the non-immigrant visas, it's a much longer process. So with refugee status, individuals who have been trying to come to the U.S., who are legally allowed to come to the U.S., have now been deported, and they have to go through the process again. Even with non-immigrant and immigrants, they have to go through the entire process again to retain their visa status again. And so that confusion and the lack of procedural guidelines for CBP officers and for the individuals, for the other institutions involved, really created chaos for, aside from from the US side, for also the airlines, who did not know whether they should put individuals on the flights or not. So we had cases where individuals would be calling us or writing us from Iran stating that 30 individuals were taken off of a flight. As they were sitting on, ready to board, ready to fly, they were called out and taken off the flight. So it's a really chaotic situation that we're hoping to deal with all of the attorneys involved, and I'll let Serena go into the details of the case that came out of this.
Yeah, having the privilege of being the fourth person, I feel like I need to take like a little temperature of the room. Is everybody still listening? Are you still here? Good. I mean, actually, just kind of for my own information, because we've been in this bubble, I don't actually know what's going on outside of the bubble. How many of you had already heard about the executive orders before we kind of started talking about them now? And how many of you were aware that people were being kind of deported and detained because of the executive orders? Okay, that's great, and I will say that it's very unusual. And it actually brings to the foreground the degree to which everybody who says this has been done before and presidents have done this before are simply incorrect. I say this as someone who fought very hard against some Obama administration policies that I believe were also civil rights violations and immigrants' rights violations. So this is not coming from a place where I'm saying that previous administrations were perfect and this is not. But I know that like in the efforts to get people involved in the advocacy with those other things, there was always kind of this like line where some people were like, well, I don't really know that much about immigration, so I don't know really, like, is this as bad as the advocates are saying? Or are they just being, you know, overzealous or whatever? But this time, I think everybody looked at this and said, I don't need to be an immigration lawyer. I don't need to be a civil rights lawyer to say that this shit sucks. You know, like this is essentially making good on a campaign promise to ban Muslims, and then having people tell him how to do it in a legal way. And since I'm an attorney advocate, I don't feel that I have to toe the line and be very neutral in everything I say. I could just go right out and say it. I have never seen anything like this. And this includes the Bush-era policies that we also fought very hard against. This is just, you know, this harkens back to the times when there were Chinese exclusions that were specifically directed at Chinese people because of the color of their skin. And it kind of ties in together, and I think Mariela was saying this at the beginning. It really ties into this question of how our criminal justice system and our immigration system are both filled with flaws that layer on top of each other to create a system that really kind of targets people based on their race and religion. I will say that in my experience working as a lawyer, I will, you know, often we end up focusing on these sort of legal technical questions, right? We sit in classrooms and we learn about all this lofty stuff. And it's even, you know, in practice, like we're writing briefs about technical things and et cetera, it's not often that we get the chance to say the legal stuff and the human stuff, it's all right there. There's no difference, right? And I think that's why a lot of us felt like we had to go to the airport on that day. You know, on Friday when the order was signed, my first thought was, you know, I'm from Lebanon. I only became a U.S. citizen a couple of years ago. Lebanon is not one of the 7, but, you know, who knows when that will change. And I have personal connections, including through marriage and families and stuff, who are from the 7 countries, right? Like, this is a personal thing. People won't be able to come visit me and meet my baby if this thing stays in place. And I was talking with my husband. I have 2 kids. It was a Saturday morning, you know, like, what are we going to do? I really wanted to go to the airport, and we just decided, you know what, we're all going to go to the airport. Because we don't want my 3-year-old son to think that this is a day just like any other day, right? Like, I wanted him to know this is a day where something really deeply unjust happened, and as citizens, we go and we express that we disapprove of this. So the 4 of us were in the airport until 2 a.m. that morning, which wasn't ideal, so then we split up after that. And Malik went on with his life with his dad. But so, you know, the kind of, I just wanted to give you that color to tell you, like, why is it that we all kind of went down there. When I was in law school, I worked with this organization that used to be the Iraqi Refugee Assistance Project and is now the International Refugee Assistance Project based out of the Urban Justice Center in New York. And they had actually reached out to some people they know and also put out a general call to say, go to the airports because we don't know what the situation will be like and lawyers are going to be needed. So I went down there, you know, my husband and family went down there to protest. I went down there as a lawyer to say, like, what can we do? I thought there would be like 20 or 30 people there. There were hundreds of people there. You know, a lot of them coming to protest, but also a significant number of lawyers who were there to say, okay, what are we going to do? I had also specifically kind of been contacted about several people, but about one lawful permanent resident, 2 brothers, the Aziz brothers, who we believed were detained inside because their flight was supposed to have come in the morning and nobody had heard from them ever since. And their U.S. citizen father, who had worked very hard to get to a point where he could sponsor his sons to come with him and live with him, was really concerned. So I arrived at the airport. I filled out what's called a G28 form, which is a representation form, along with another attorney. And the 2 of us went to the back and tried to find anyone from Customs and Border Protection to say, let us back there, we want to see our clients. It was very hard to find anyone. They were all hiding in the back. And when we finally found someone, he didn't even take the time to look at who we were looking for. He said, no, nobody's getting in there. No way, no how, that's not going to happen. So at the same time, we were kind of talking to the litigation team that had been put together to file a lawsuit on these brothers' behalf. And they filed a federal lawsuit in the Eastern District of Virginia saying both that lawyers should have access and also that they shouldn't be deported because this entire executive order is unconstitutional. The judge issued a temporary restraining order within, I would say, just over half an hour of the papers coming in, saying let the lawful residents, permanent residents see their lawyers, and don't deport any of them until the merits of this case are adjudicated. So she gave like a 7-day window, which actually has now been renewed. So we went back with the order trying to give it to someone, and they just did not want to come out. So we were using intermediaries of the airport police, giving the order to them saying, we have a court order saying we should go back, and we want to work with you, we want to be reasonable. Tell them we're okay. 2 lawyers can go in. I speak Arabic. There was someone else who spoke Farsi. Like, we can go in limited, people and just take stock of who the detainees are, find who needs representation, at least inform the families. Like, I was having people coming up to me, grown men who were crying and saying, I don't know what's happening with my elderly father. He didn't know this was happening when he got on his flight. Like, these are long, long flights. People have layovers in Europe, they're out of touch. I know I'm going, a little bit over, but I just feel like this is such an important thing to kind of see how the human aspect interacts with the litigation aspect. They wouldn't respond to the court order, and to make a long story short, Senator Cory Booker ended up down there with the court order in hand saying, let the lawyers in, and they wouldn't even come out and talk to him. So this was, and I just want to use that to kind of highlight, like the American system is built on the principle of separation of powers, and that's how the democracy works, and that's how the checks and balances work, right? That's how we know that nobody's going to be completely excessive and that each branch is going to check the other. Here you had an executive branch agency that had taken the law into its own hands. You had a judicial order from a judge, and you had a legislator saying, talk to me, at least give me information, and the executive was saying no to both. It took more than a week and more than 5 court orders to eventually get the administration to say, okay, we're going to stop enforcing this for the time being. So now, ostensibly, they're letting lawful permanent residents in, they're letting first-time immigrants in, they've actually gone back to point of pre, and for the people who have physical cancellation stamps on their visas, they are allowing them to come in with a waiver. That's like now the blanket policy. So the situation has been resolved somewhat. I will tell you that we are still fielding calls from people where the airlines are confused because they have to pay a penalty and they have to pay the cost of returning the person if they bring someone on board who doesn't have proper papers. And throughout this process, we would talk to the airlines, we would give them court orders, and Customs and Border Patrol at the same time would lie to them and tell them that those orders don't mean that they have to let the people on their flights. So, nutshell, I'm sure we'll talk more in questions and answers, but I just kind of wanted to give you this sense of how this all came together. We're now the Dulles Justice Coalition, which is this loose alliance of all volunteer attorneys and non-attorneys who are working together to address the situation as it gets resolved. Some of it is front end on the ground, some of it is answering legal questions on the back end and trying to match people with pro bono counsel, either immigration counsel or pro bono teams of non-immigration attorneys who are willing to work with people to get waivers or file habeas petitions or other litigation. And this is sort of, this is how this has all evolved. But it remains to be seen what's going to happen in the future, because it should be said that the court order that's resulted in halting all of this is actually a temporary restraining order. So there's going to be arguments this week, and the situation is rapidly in flux. But that's where we are.
I will have Courtney and Daniel from Aiken to talk about what they're doing internally, and then also Courtney's working externally with different organizations. Hi there.
My name's Daniel Graver.
Do you want to come and sit here? We can exchange.
No. I'm staying, it's fine.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So we're both attorneys at Aiken Gov, and I think that the perspective that we can bring to this, so like what you can do from within a law firm and the resources that a law firm can bring to these kinds of things. And one thing that I want to point out to each and every one of you is there's over 1,000 attorneys and non-attorneys who are part of this Dulles Justice Coalition, but nobody appointed Golnoosh or Courtney or myself to do anything. There was a vacuum, and people stepped up into that vacuum to help organize, to help all of these people who needed help. So like Serene wasn't waiting for someone to say, oh, we need someone to go do this, would you go do that? She stepped up into a really important leadership role, and that's sort of how this whole coalition came together. So it's just remember that the next time there's a crisis, you don't have to wait for someone to tell you that there's something to do. You can step up, you can do it, and you can make a big difference. So I want to start with Courtney, who has helped organize the Dulles Justice Coalition from a conference call, I think, Friday night a week ago.
So I'm going to start with a shameless plug. You should definitely all go read the executive orders, which you can find on our website at dullesjustice.org. So go read that. And I think Daniel brings up a really good point, which is that there was a leadership vacuum. We all got this email from IRAP that said, please go to the airport, and then also, sorry, there's so much going on, please self-organize. So we did, and I actually just met Golnoosh and Serene in person right now after many, many conference calls all week, so it was very exciting. But there's still a lot to be done, and there's still a lot that all of you can do. So one, go sign up on the website, volunteer, come on out, there's a table, it's super fun, there's always lots of food. And it's just really nice and exciting to be out there. You can learn a lot. You can get connected to really great immigration attorneys that are doing really great work, that are going to be great resources for you in the future. You can learn about an important area of the law, which is certainly going to continue to be important over the next 4 years and onward. There's a great QZ article, which I just want to give credit to Daniel for being here, because if you'll notice, Daniel is different from the rest of the panelists today. And it actually talks about the work that the women are doing on the ground, and the immigration is very dominated by women, which is awesome. There's a whole, you should read the article, but it's a lot about, the importance of women stepping up into leadership roles and taking on important public service legal components. Go read that article. I can send you a reading list after this if you want. But there's been a lot of back-end volunteer efforts getting together, working on this important issue. There's still a lot of work that you guys can all do with us. We would love to have you. And I want to touch on something that Serene mentioned, which is the Cory Booker came out and showed up. Also, how many of you heard about the Washington State order that actually ended up being okay, good. So, an important thing to understand is that both Minnesota and Washington have Democratic governors. So there's a big overarching theme here, which is it's very important to elect Democratic leaders that can come out and advocate for this. So over the last few years, you've seen a lot of what are Democrats doing, and you saw a lot of stalemating from Republicans. I'm sorry to make this really partisan right now, but it's just something to think about when it comes time in 2018 and 2020. Regardless of who you're voting for, it's really important to come out and vote for people who are supporting your ideals. And that serves to support our checks and balances. So just remember that in the next elections while they're coming up. Like it's great to go out, it's great to vote, but get involved in registration efforts, get involved in sort of your community and figure out who the candidates are that you're supporting, and be a voice to your friends and to your communities about why that's an important person to support, because the checks and balances are so important, and I think we're seeing that a lot more now with an executive administration that sort of maybe doesn't respect it as much as we would like, and so it's just a really important thing. So there are going to be lots and lots of opportunities to get involved. I highly encourage you to visit our website. I highly encourage you to sign up to get our emails. They're beautiful. We have this amazing email team that does an incredible job, that sends us drafts of emails to look over all the time. We have a Twitter page. It's really like, given that this organization didn't exist, a week and a half ago, it's pretty amazing what they've put together. So if you're looking for opportunities to get involved, come find us. Thank you.
So, so within Aiken Gump, like within a big firm, certainly, I think we both picked Aiken Gump as where we went because we saw their commitment to pro bono, and have certainly seen that throughout our years there. And so working with the pro bono partner from the very beginning, like the firm's been very supportive, but I think all of us has been working 80-hour weeks since we started to try and keep up with what's going on the immigration side. So I'm not an immigration attorney. I don't know anything about immigration law. I know a tiny bit about organizing because I spent too many years on campaigns. And so within the firm, one of the things that I stepped up to do, so within the firm, was recruit people in the firm who did know something about immigration law and organize within the firm. So just a lot of stuff, find people who wanted to help, organize them into teams, figure out how we're going to intake questions and then triage them out. And that's actually, we've worked very closely with Serene on that, who's actually taken the bulk of sorting out cases to the whole rest of DC, where you've had firms and attorneys from all over getting together. I've also had an opportunity to, and this is sort of an example of lawyering. I don't know anything about immigration law. I accidentally ended up representing, or being part of a team, representing a family that got split up, and their 70-year-old parents got stuck in Amsterdam because they got on a plane from Tehran, then they landed and then they got stuck. And so these 70-year-old grandparents, their kids are US citizens, were stuck in the airport for 6 days, sleeping in the airport. We tried to prevent them from getting sent back to Tehran, and we eventually got them here last Thursday. But that was a huge team effort. And I don't know anything about immigration law, but I know how to call an airline. And working through a big firm, I could find someone who knew someone who was in the general counsel's office and work our way up there. And also working through our team, work your way through DHS and CBP, and just keep calling people, and eventually we harassed them enough that we got a waiver. right? But that was, I don't know, there's probably 10 different attorneys who were working on different pieces of that at different times. So there's like absolutely an opportunity for you to get involved. And that's just like, a lot of lawyering is just showing up. Anyway, so if you have any particular questions about anything, as you want to,
Yeah, I think we have a little bit of time for questions. I just wanted to reiterate a few points that were made. We've talked a lot about the legal work that's been going on, and these are great opportunities for you to get involved. I love that Courtney talked about the political points. You are a constituent, right? So you should demand of your bosses, who are elected officials, that they do the right thing, and you should run for office.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like I have been telling everybody that I know who's younger and has more energy than me to run for office, right? We need more people. We don't have to wait for somebody else to do it. And then the last point that I want to make really briefly is activism is a huge component of this, right? It is essential, right, that we speak out, we have our voice, do it, right? Don't wait, go out, have a voice, tweet, put on social media, whatever young people do these days, I don't know, I can't keep up with y'all, you know, and speak out, right? You have an important voice. But I also want to say this, and I've run into this a lot over the last 2 weeks with my good friends, is be sure to conserve your energy and pay attention to your mental health and speak with your loved ones in real life, right? Not just online. And don't get too angry, right? Because that's not often constructive. Sometimes it's wonderful and very constructive. But you have to also be careful with yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint, right? So make sure that those of your friends who are going, through these same things, that you reach out to them, and that we remember to advocate for justice, but to also, work in kindness. So I like to always just remind all of us of those important points too. It's okay not to do everything, right? It's okay. Okay, so we have some questions. Any questions anybody would like to ask? We have about 9 minutes.